We're Tony Chocolonely. We are a chocolate brand that exists to change the cocoa industry. Or as we say it, we are an impact company that makes chocolate and not the other way around. Our mission is to make chocolate 100% slave-free.
What's not to love about chocolate? Well, 2 million children working illegally on cocoa plantations. That's unfair. Kids playing free like a boss. That's fair. Modern slavery to make a sweet luxury. Unfair. Equal rights, equal opportunities. Fair. Big chocolate companies exploiting African communities. No way. That's unfair. Sharing wealth, looking after each other, fair. Chocolate can be a powerful force of change. Join Tony's Chocolonely. Make illegal child labor and modern day slavery a shame of the past. Crazy about chocolate. Serious about it.
Yeah, here we are. As a company with such a bold ambition to change not just the way we make chocolate, but the entire industry, we've made Tony's roadmap. That is our strategy to achieve our mission, and it has just 3 pillars. Because with a bold ambition like that, you would need a simple strategy. The first one is Tony's creates awareness by creating awareness about the problems in the cocoa industry, but also what you can do about it. We engage consumers worldwide and empower them to help us change. Secondly, as Tony's, we want to lead by example by having a direct trade relationships with cocoa farmers in Ghana and the Ivory Coast and working with them, lifting them out of poverty and fighting child labor together. And thirdly, realizing that even though we grow quickly, it'll take too long for Tony's to become a world dominant player. We need to inspire other chocolate companies to change and change with us. So that's why at Tony's we want to inspire them to act.
Go ahead, and what do we want to inspire other companies to act on? What do they want them to do? It's none of the individual topics are that different than what you might see in other sustainability programs, but we think there's a really collective approach to addressing the multidimensional issues that there are in the cocoa industry. We call them the 5 sourcing principles. They're very easy to read. It's traceable beans, so a direct traceable relationship with our partner cooperatives in West Africa. We pay a higher price for the beans. Fundamentally, cocoa beans are priced way too low. We commit to the long term. We want partner cooperatives to know that we will be there in 2 years, in 3 years, that it is worth it to invest in this project with us because we will be there in the long term. We focus on quality and productivity because by increasing yields, we can also increase farmer incomes. And we focus on strong farmers. We believe in farmers and their democratically organized cooperatives as our partners on the ground, as the people that we co-create this more fair, direct cocoa supply chain with. So the 5 sourcing principles are really the basis of our way of working, of how Tony's approaches buying cocoa beans. Next slide. But as Paul said, it's not enough for just Tony's to do it. And so if you think of the 5 sourcing principles as being the second pillar of leading by example, it's also fundamental to inspiring to act. So we have a few different things that we do for Inspire to Act, and Paul will address too. But as Jessica said, my title at Tony's is Inspire to Actress, and a very core part of Inspiring to Act is inspiring other chocolate brands to act and take their responsibility for the systemic inequality that exists in the cocoa supply chain, to pull that responsibility towards them. There has been legislation proposals for this. There's the Harkin-Engel Protocol, which you all might have heard of. That was over 20 years ago. There have been promises and promises, and there has not been concrete action. So what we really feel at Tony's is that we don't need any more incremental changes and people changing small parts of their supply chain. We need a revolution. We need big time commitment from other chocolate brands. Next slide, please, Paul. And one of those ways that we're doing that is by what we call Tony's Open Chain, which is we're making our supply chain, not just our way of working and all the work that we've done with our partner cooperatives and all the investments we've done on mapping, finding and remediating child labor, mapping farms, working on productivity, all of the farmer coaching that we've done already. So we're not just opening our basic way of working, but we're opening our entire supply chain, the enablers, as we say. So the cocoa traders, the cocoa processor that we're working with. And we want to make it basically easier for other chocolate brands to do the right thing. It's a fairly new program. It started end of 2019, but I'm really proud of how far we've come. So it's not a certification program. It's very different from that. As Jessica said, my background is in certification, but this is really an industry-led initiative where we recognize that we compete on shelf on chocolate, right? So we're on the same shelf at the grocery store. We're competing with each other who makes the most delicious chocolate bar. But what we are not competing on is child labor. And what we are not competing on is deforestation. We are collaborating on sourcing the right cocoa beans. So underneath, you can see a couple of the brands that we're working with. Walton, which is our largest retailer in the Netherlands. Chocolonely, which is a new German chocolate run by a celebrity. Aldi, which owns Trader Joe's in the US, will be launching an open chain product. So we're really proud of the partnerships we've made so far, and we have really big ambitions, just like Tony's Chocolonely has big ambitions for itself as well.
Thanks, Joke. So as Tony's, we show how you can make chocolate differently. We help other companies to work according to those 5 sourcing principles in the same way that we do. But now it's time for others to join too. So you might have seen these 4 bars, and they might look familiar to you. We designed them in this Sweet Solution campaign to go out to other and the big chocolate companies to also step up their game and change the way they do business. After 20 years of promises and pilot programs, nothing much has changed. There's still 1.5 million children that work illegally in cocoa in just Ghana and Ivory Coast, and more than 30,000 victims of modern slavery have been reported. And especially for a sweet luxurious chocolate, we think that is insane and doesn't need to be like that. So with this campaign, we not only want to raise awareness and spark consumer activation, but we call out to big chocolate companies to change. And that might not even be enough. So our latest push that we're doing is calling for legislation in both Europe and the US that holds company accountable. So if you want to join our quest for that and want to help us change the chocolate industry, please scan this QR code and join us and be part of our Sweet Solution. So then back to you, Jessica. And I think there was a couple of questions that you still had from the audience or in the preparation.
We did. We do have some new questions available. I apologize. We had some notifications pop up, but we should be able to stay until 1 right now. So I'm sorry to have rushed you. I apologize for that. The first question is, how do you ensure your chocolate has less labor issues? What tools do you use? And is your organization structured differently than other chocolate companies?
Well, that's actually a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But I think first of all, as Joke said, it starts with traceable cocoa beans. So we know exactly where we get our cocoa from. We source from 7 cooperatives, 3 in Ghana, 4 in Ivory Coast, and we know all the farmers that supply to that cooperative. So that's the first step. Then with the cooperatives, with the help of the cooperatives, we invest in productivity and further professionalization of the cooperatives. And we also pay a higher price for cocoa because all the problems in cocoa actually come down to the a problem of extreme poverty. And if you want to fight poverty, you have to do a lot of things, but you also have to pay a higher price. So that's what we do. And then with that, there's with farmers out of poverty, they can actually send their kids to school and pay for school fees. But on top of that, we have a comprehensive monitoring system, community-based. So people from the cocoa communities are trained to interview parents and children and look for risk of child labor and actually identify possible cases of child labor. And when we find a case, we know that child, we know the parents, so we can start, or they can start remediating it, starting with conversations, but also sometimes very practical, like helping out with school kids, or maybe things that a family needs at that time.
The goal is, as you said, Jessica, it's all about transparency. I think traditionally there was a claim to say, oh, there's no child labor in the supply chain. I think here the point is to bring it out in the open, take responsibility for it. We found it, and now here's what we're going to do about it. And that's the change that we want to see in the cocoa industry.
Thank you. Next question is there ever a circumstance where child labor is ethical, like a family farm or plantations?
Well, no. So child labor is by definition illegal, and not my definition or our definition. It's defined by the International Labour Organization and actually laid down in laws, Ghanaian and Ivorian laws. But there's also a thing, it's called child work. So it's an expert difference, but helping out your parents in the weekend after school, doing light work, which is not dangerous to you. Of course, that's fine to do, and that happens on many farms all around the world. But that's different from child labor. So I would argue that there's not ever a reason why a child should be in an illegal activity that damages his or her potential.
Where can I buy Tony Chocolonely's products today? Take my money.
Whole Foods is big carrier. Where else, Paul?
Yeah, we're in a lot of the what's called the natural channels, or the smaller shops and coffee outlets. But most of them you will find in the Whole Foods. Yeah.
We also have an Amazon web shop.
Absolutely.
I send chocolate to my family regularly.
Very good. Consumer choice is sadly seemingly unaffected by ethical sourcing. How does this initiative plan to motivate direct competitors to make changes?
I've worked in this field for a long time. There's certainly a desire where a consumer makes a decision to buy a more ethical brand, and there are many consumers that do, and there's different studies that look at that. But I think ultimately why I enjoy working for Tony's is that as a company, it's just your responsibility. You don't have to wait for the consumer to ask. It is obliged to you to offer this ethical, fair product. And that's what we want to see for the chocolate industry as a whole. It's just not fair to put on the shelf a brand that doesn't comply with these sort of raise the bar, but raise the floor standards. So yes, there are consumers who ask for it, but you can't wait for the consumers to change your mind. I think as a chocolate brand or as any brand, it's your responsibility to take responsibility for what's happening in your supply chain.
Yeah. Now, I will say that nobody needs chocolate, and maybe some of you will disagree with me, but it's not part of a diet that you should take. So chocolate is really a gift that you give to yourself or to someone else. And if you realize that, then who wants to give a gift that has that is tainted with child labor or even modern slavery? And it's not necessary. That's what we prove. Our model works. We are also a commercial company. We grow quickly, so we also need to earn money to invest in our growth, and that's what we can do. So it doesn't need to be either or. Farmers can get out of poverty, and you can be successful as a company.
Are you concerned about single crop dependency or the environmental impacts of chocolate?
I think with cocoa, you have that slightly less than with other crops that I've worked with. And I'm thinking of tea, I'm thinking of palm oil, I'm thinking of pineapples. Cocoa is a natural agroforestry crop, so it grows beautifully under shade. So having agroforestry and a multitude of species for shade is possible. Cocoa is a cash crop for smallholder farmers in West Africa, so they'll be growing other crops as well, both for their own kitchen needs as well as other things that they'll sell. I've seen mango, I've seen palm oil. So it's really in cocoa, especially in West Africa, that monoculture is not so much of an issue. We are more concerned about things like deforestation and encroaching into nationally protected forests because of low yield. So it's easier to encroach rather than to rehabilitate an old cocoa farm. So those are more environmental concerns, but monocropping is not so much of a concern in cocoa.
Our last question for today is, who are your current mission allies?
Thank you for asking. Well, I showed them on the slide. So we have the largest Dutch retailer, one of the premier discount retailers in the world, which I actually am especially proud of, because I think that, yes, you do have to pay more for cocoa to do it right. But if a discounter can do it, then it's really putting the entire retail industry on notice that this is a possibility and this is a responsibility that you can take. And I'm also quite happy with Chocolonely, because they are, we met them a year ago and they said, they saw that Netflix documentary Rotten, and they said, oh, I want to bring out a chocolate product, but now that I know these are the issues, then the only right way to do it is with the 5 sourcing principles. So that was personally very rewarding. We have bigger ambitions than this. I think what is meaningful about the mission allies that we have right now is that it increases our pile of beans by about, well, I think we buy about 2/3 of the open chain flow. And so there's another third on top of that. So the more beans that are going through the flow of open chain, it means the more beans are being bought at the right price, at a higher price, at a living income enabling price. And so the more impact we can make. So we know that we can't do it by ourselves. It wouldn't be healthy anyway for partner cooperatives to only have one buyer, that you want them to have a diverse array of buyers. And if all those buyers are invested in what they're doing for child labor, paying the right price, looking at the mapping and helping them look out for deforestation, then we're really making change. So I think it's significant that at Tony's we realize that we can't and we don't want to make the impact alone. We want to share it with others, even if we're going to compete on shelf.
That's tremendous. I think that really sets you apart. And thank you for sharing and being so candid with these conversations. It's very important. So thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having us. What an innovative way to have a conference. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And you're currently broadcasting from Amsterdam, right? Or the Netherlands?
Yeah. Yep. Paul and I are both here.
It must be very late.
But in the Netherlands. That's not too bad.
Thank you for making time for us. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.